Neediness is one of the most hidden and destructive energies in human relationships. It is not always obvious in its form, because it can wear many faces: the desire for approval, the fear of rejection, the longing for attention, or the hunger to be constantly validated. At its root, neediness is not about love, nor about genuine connection. It is about fear. The fear of being left behind, the fear of being unseen, the fear of being insignificant. This fear manifests as grasping, clinging, demanding, and controlling. And the more it shows itself, the more it erodes the foundation of respect that every healthy bond is built upon. Respect is a natural consequence of strength. People respect what stands on its own. They respect what has its own center, its own gravity, its own wholeness. When you encounter someone who does not need you in order to feel complete, you are drawn to them. You admire their independence, their quiet self-assurance. This admiration is what keeps bonds alive and magnetic. But when neediness arises, the energy shifts. Instead of being drawn to, people start to withdraw. Instead of admiration, there is irritation. Instead of closeness, there is distance. Neediness destroys respect because it communicates loudly, "I cannot hold myself together without you." It sends the message that one's sense of worth is dependent on another's presence, words, or approval. But when worth depends on another, it creates pressure. No one wants to carry the weight of someone else's self-esteem. No one wants to feel like they are responsible for filling another's emptiness every day. This burden suffocates relationships. It takes away the freedom that is necessary for love to breathe. The paradox of neediness is that it wants closeness but creates distance. It desires love but pushes love away. It longs for respect but destroys it with every grasping gesture. Think of a hand that holds too tightly onto sand. The tighter the grip, the more the sand slips out between the fingers. Relationships are the same. The tighter one clings, the more life drains out of the connection. True connection does not come from clinging. It comes from freedom. It comes from two whole individuals who choose to share their time, their energy, and their presence, not out of desperation, but out of genuine desire. Neediness breaks this balance because it shifts the dynamic from sharing to demanding. Instead of, "Oh, I am whole and I want to walk beside you," the message becomes, "I am incomplete and I need you to complete me." This shift strips away equality and respect. Respect thrives where boundaries are honored. Respect thrives where individuality is intact. If someone cannot stand on their own, they will not be seen as equal, but as dependent. And dependence, when born from fear rather than cooperation, is not inspiring. It does not elevate, it diminishes. It takes away the dignity of the one who clings and the admiration of the one who is clung to. The root of neediness lies in the inability to sit with oneself. When silence becomes unbearable, when loneliness feels like death, when one cannot rest in their own presence, they will grasp for another to fill that void. But no person, no matter how loving or giving, can fill an inner void that has not been faced. It is like trying to quench thirst by holding onto a mirage. The relief will never come. And because it never comes, the cycle of demanding, clinging, and disappointment repeats endlessly. The way out of neediness is not through getting more from others, but through building within oneself. Self-respect is the antidote. Self-respect is cultivated by knowing your own worth, by learning to be comfortable in your own company, by realizing that your value does not shrink when someone walks away and does not grow when someone pays attention to you. Respect is rooted in inner strength, and when you carry that strength, others will reflect it back to you. In relationships, balance is everything. To give and to receive freely, without fear, without calculation, without desperation. That is what nurtures bonds that last. But when giving becomes a way to earn worth, or when receiving becomes a demand rather than a gift, respect dies. And once respect is gone, love soon follows. This is why the strongest relationships are built by two people who do not need each other, but choose each other. Choice carries power. Neediness carries weakness. Choice says, "I can stand without you, but I want to walk with you." Neediness says, "I cannot stand unless you hold me." And no one respects what cannot stand alone. If you wish to preserve respect, then learn to let go of desperation. Learn to let go of the urge to demand reassurance, to seek constant attention, to measure your worth through someone else's eyes. The more you release this energy, the lighter you become. And the lighter you become, the more attractive your presence feels. People are drawn to those who are free, not to those who are imprisoned by fear. Respect is not built in a single moment, nor is it destroyed in a single act. It is built day by day in how you carry yourself, how you speak, how you act, how you honor your own boundaries and the boundaries of others. When you stand tall in your own worth, when you no longer beg for love, but allow love to come, when you no longer chase validation but rest in your own presence, you radiate dignity. And dignity commands respect. Neediness destroys respect because it announces loudly that dignity is absent. It says, I cannot exist without you. And that is not love, that is dependency. Dependency takes, drains, and suffocates. Love gives, breathes, and uplifts. One cannot exist where the other dominates. So long as one clings, the other will pull away. So long as one demands, the other will resist. So long as one collapses, the other will struggle under the weight. The cycle will repeat until one learns that freedom is the foundation of respect, and that respect is the soil where love grows strongest. When we speak of boundaries, many people immediately think of walls, fences, or limitations. They imagine boundaries as restrictions, as something that keeps them from experiencing freedom. Yet the paradox is that true freedom cannot exist without boundaries. Lack of boundaries is not a sign of openness or liberation. It is, in fact, the slow erosion of one's energy, one's clarity, and ultimately one's sense of self. A life without boundaries is like a river without banks. The water spills everywhere, flooding the land, losing direction, and never reaching the ocean it was meant to find. To live without boundaries is to live at the mercy of other people's demands, desires, and distractions. You wake up, and before you have even gathered your own thoughts, you are already carrying the weight of what others expect from you. The day unfolds not according to your intention, but according to the noise around you. Every interruption is allowed in, every opinion is absorbed, every demand is entertained. Without boundaries, your life becomes reactive rather than proactive. You become an instrument played by many hands, each one pulling your strings without asking if you consent to the music they make. Boundaries are not a selfish act, they are a necessary act. When a person lacks them, they confuse selflessness with self-erasure. They believe that to always say yes is a form of kindness, but in truth it is often fear. Fear of disappointing others, fear of conflict, fear of rejection. And so the lack of boundaries grows, not because the world is cruel, but because the individual has not yet understood the sacred duty of protecting their own energy. Every yes that is not aligned with your heart is a quiet betrayal of yourself. And over time, these small betrayals accumulate until you no longer recognize what you truly value, what you truly desire, or who you truly are. Consider the body itself. The skin is a boundary. It separates what belongs inside from what must remain outside. The immune system is a boundary. It protects the inner world from invaders that would cause harm. The mind too requires such boundaries. Without them, every thought, every criticism, every passing influence can enter unfiltered, leaving confusion and exhaustion behind. Just as the body would weaken without its protective systems, so does the spirit weaken without boundaries. The lack of boundaries shows itself in many subtle ways. It shows itself in relationships where one person always gives and the other always takes. It shows itself in workplaces where someone is praised for their willingness to do everything, yet silently they burn out, carrying responsibilities that were never theirs to hold. It shows itself in friendships where resentment brews beneath the surface because one has not found the courage to say, "This is too much." It shows itself in the inability to rest because rest feels like guilt when boundaries are absent. And it shows itself most deeply in the quiet dissatisfaction of a life lived for others, while the voice within remains unheard. Boundaries are not created to keep love out, they are created to let true love in. When you lack boundaries, you invite everything, and when everything enters, nothing has value. It is like a house without doors. Strangers walk in, storms blow through, and precious things are lost. But when you set boundaries, you choose what is allowed to remain in your space. You choose what nourishes you, what inspires you, what aligns with your growth. Boundaries are an act of discernment, of saying, "This is what belongs in my life, and this is what does not." The lack of boundaries is also the lack of direction. Without them, your time is not your own. Hours slip away to tasks that drain rather than build. Days are spent on noise rather than silence, distraction rather than focus. Slowly, your life begins to feel scattered. because the energy that could have been concentrated into one powerful stream has been spilled into 1,000 puddles. The great works of human spirit, the transformations that inspire generations, are never born from scattered energy. They are born from concentrated presence, from disciplined focus, from the ability to say no to the unnecessary so that the essential may thrive. To live without boundaries is also to live without balance. It is to give endlessly without replenishing, to listen endlessly without being heard, to bend endlessly without standing tall. Balance requires a rhythm of yes and no, of opening and closing, of giving and protecting. Without this rhythm, exhaustion becomes the natural state. The body may still move, but the spirit grows tired. And when the spirit is tired, even the simplest tasks feel heavy. There is also a deeper danger in the lack of boundaries. It teaches others how to treat you. When you never say no, others learn that your time, your energy, your presence are endlessly available. When you never assert your needs, others assume you have none. And when you constantly bend, others no longer see you as someone with a spine. In this way, the lack of boundaries not only drains you, but also shapes how the world perceives you. It is not cruelty. It is simply the reflection of what you have allowed. True strength is not in endless giving. True strength is in giving with intention, in choosing when to open and when to close, in knowing where you end and where the other begins. Without boundaries, there is no separation, and without separation, there is no identity. Boundaries are the framework within which your life can take form. They are the lines that shape the art of your existence. A lack of boundaries is not freedom, it is chaos. It is the surrender of your will to the tides of circumstance. It is to live unrooted, always swayed by the winds of others. To create boundaries is not to shut life out. It is to channel life more powerfully. It is to protect the soil in which your purpose grows, to guard the energy that fuels your actions, to preserve the clarity that directs your steps. Disrespecting yourself is a quiet habit, one that often goes unnoticed because it is not loud like an insult shouted across a room, and it is not visible like a wound left on the skin. Instead, it is subtle, internal, and gradual, but it is powerful enough to shape the entire course of your life. To disrespect yourself means to consistently deny your own worth, to belittle your needs, to abandon your inner voice, and to act against the harmony of your own being. It is not something that happens in one moment. It is an accumulation of choices, thoughts, and actions that over time diminish the light you carry inside. Every time you ignore your intuition, you create a small fracture in the relationship with yourself. The inner voice that whispers what is right, what feels balanced, and what resonates with truth is the compass of the spirit. Yet, many silence this compass for the sake of pleasing others, for the sake of avoiding conflict, or for the illusion of fitting into structures that do not align with who they are. This silencing of the self is one of the first forms of self-disrespect. To live without listening inwardly is to drift on the surface of existence without direction, without anchoring, without depth. Another form of self-disrespect lies in how you treat your body. The body is the vessel through which you experience life. To constantly push it beyond its natural rhythm, to fill it with things that drain energy rather than replenish it, to deny it rest when it cries out for stillness. These are acts of neglect that accumulate. Over time, they manifest as fatigue, illness, and a heaviness that clouds the mind. Respecting yourself is not only a mental or emotional practice, it is also physical. To ignore the body's needs is to say silently, I do not value the home in which my spirit resides. Disrespect also shows itself in the way you allow others to treat you. When you continuously accept behavior that diminishes you, when you stay silent in the face of disregard, when you lower your standards because you fear being left alone, this is another way of betraying your own worth. Many do not realize that the boundaries they fail to uphold with others reflect the boundaries they fail to honor within themselves. If you cannot stand firm in the presence of disrespect from outside, it is often because there is already disrespect growing from within. Thoughts are another arena where self-disrespect thrives. The mind is powerful, and its dialogue shapes reality. Yet countless people speak to themselves with cruelty, repeating words they would never dare direct at another person. I am not good enough, I am not worthy, I will never succeed. These inner chants erode confidence, carve deep grooves of doubt, and slowly train the mind to reject possibilities. Respecting yourself requires vigilance over the words you allow to echo inside, for they are seeds. If you plant only negativity, do not be surprised when the harvest is barren. Time is also a measure of respect. To spend your hours endlessly distracted, to drown in noise that adds no value, to give energy to tasks and people who do not nurture your growth, these are acts of wasting the most precious resource you have. Life is a finite journey, and every moment given away without awareness is a silent agreement to live beneath your true capacity. To respect yourself means to treat time as sacred, to guard it carefully, and to invest it in that which brings meaning. There is also the way you handle mistakes and failures. Self-disrespect appears when you punish yourself endlessly for not being perfect, when you cling to guilt long after its lesson has been learned, when you treat yourself as undeserving of compassion. Every being makes mistakes. It is part of growth, part of becoming. Yet many allow their mistakes to become cages, identities they cannot escape. To respect yourself means to hold your failures gently, to extract wisdom from them, and then to release them instead of wearing them as chains. Comparison is another path of disrespect. When you measure your worth against another, when you decide your light is dimmer because theirs shines differently, you strip yourself of individuality. Each path is unique, each journey carved by different lessons, different challenges, different timing. To constantly compare is to deny the beauty of your own unfolding. Respecting yourself means recognizing that your pace, your growth, and your life cannot be placed against the yardstick of another's. Self-disrespect is not always loud, but its effects are visible in the way a person carries themselves. Shoulders bent, gaze lowered, voice uncertain. These are physical manifestations of inner disregard. But so too are the choices one makes, staying in situations that suffocate the spirit, chasing validation from places that never offer it, pretending to be someone else to feel accepted. These patterns are born from a lack of respect for who you are at your core. Respect begins with recognition. To see yourself clearly without distortion, to acknowledge both strengths and weaknesses without judgment, is the foundation. It is not about arrogance, not about inflating the self with illusions of superiority. It is about understanding that your existence has value, that your voice matters, that your energy deserves to be preserved and not squandered. Respect grows from the daily practices of listening to your needs, aligning your actions with your principles, and refusing to abandon yourself in exchange for temporary comfort. Disrespecting yourself is like eroding the soil beneath your own feet. It weakens the foundation upon which you stand. Slowly, you begin to feel unsteady, unsure, disconnected. The outer world reflects this instability, presenting you with relationships, experiences, and outcomes that mirror the lack of respect you hold within. What you tolerate internally, life will echo externally. There are moments in life when the inner world feels like a storm, where every thought collides with another, where feelings rise and fall without rhythm, and where clarity disappears in the haze of reaction. This is what can be called emotional chaos. It is not simply stress, nor is it just sadness, anger, or fear. It is the state in which emotions take the lead and the individual becomes a passenger, carried away without direction. Emotional chaos does not happen suddenly, it builds slowly. It grows from unresolved pain, from unexpressed thoughts, from experiences that were swallowed but never digested. When these fragments gather, they swirl together like heavy clouds, creating thunder within the mind and lightning in the heart. To live in emotional chaos is to live in imbalance. The body is tense, the breath is shallow, the mind restless, and the heart unsettled. One moment feels like joy is possible, and the very next, despair takes over. The inner dialogue becomes loud, and every external trigger magnifies the confusion. A small disagreement can feel like betrayal, a minor mistake can appear like failure, and even silence can sound like rejection. This is the nature of chaos. It amplifies, it distorts, and it traps. At the core of emotional chaos lies resistance. The refusal to let go of what has already happened, the inability to accept what is present, and the fear of what the future may hold. Resistance creates friction, and this friction heats the mind. The more one tries to control what is uncontrollable, the more the fire spreads. In this way, chaos feeds itself. Thought fuels emotion. Emotion fuels reaction, reaction fuels regret, and regret fuels more thought. The cycle tightens like a knot, pulling the individual deeper into entanglement. When the mind is lost in chaos, perception is clouded. The ability to see situations as they are becomes impossible. Instead, everything is seen through the lens of disturbance. Words spoken by others are misinterpreted, actions are judged harshly, and the world outside begins to reflect the storm inside. This distortion is dangerous because it makes illusions appear real. A fleeting emotion can be mistaken for permanent truth, and temporary discomfort can be mistaken for absolute suffering. Emotional chaos does not only affect the mind, it penetrates the body. The nervous system responds to inner turbulence as if it were real danger. The heartbeat accelerates, muscles contract, digestion slows, and sleep is disturbed. Over time, this constant state of turmoil wears down vitality. The body carries the burden of the emotions, and the health of the individual suffers silently under the weight of inner disorder. Yet emotional chaos, as destructive as it feels, is also a teacher. It shows clearly where attachments lie, where expectations dominate, and where fear hides. The chaos is not random, it is a signal. It reveals the patterns that have been ignored, the wounds that remain unhealed, and the truths that have been resisted. If one dares to look closely, chaos can become a mirror, reflecting not just confusion, but the roots of that confusion. The power of awareness becomes evident here. To recognize chaos is the first step towards shifting it. But recognition does not mean fighting against it. Fighting chaos with more force only strengthens it. Instead, awareness is a calm observation, a step back from identification. It is noticing the waves without drowning in them, hearing the noise without becoming the noise, feeling the storm without forgetting the sky beyond it. When emotional chaos is observed rather than obeyed, it begins to lose power. The emotions may still arise, but they no longer dictate action. The thoughts may still race, but they no longer control direction. The space between feeling and reacting begins to widen, and in this space lies freedom. It is in this gap that choice is born. One can choose to respond rather than react, to release rather than hold, to breathe rather than suffocate. Silence is the medicine for chaos, not the silence of suppression, but the silence of awareness. In silence, the noise loses its grip. In stillness, the storm begins to weaken. Silence does not erase emotion, but it allows it to pass without chains. Like clouds that gather and dissolve, emotions rise and fall when there is space for them to move freely. But when the space is filled with constant reaction, emotions stagnate and turn into storms. To walk through emotional chaos is to walk through fire. It burns, it consumes, and it leaves one vulnerable. But fire also transforms. When the unnecessary is burned away, what remains is pure. The journey through chaos is not meant to destroy, but to strip away illusions, to expose what is fragile, and to point toward strength. The transformation is not immediate, but it begins the moment one chooses not to be consumed by the flames. Emotional chaos is a reminder of human fragility and human strength. It shows how easily balance can be lost and how difficult it is to reclaim. But it also shows the resilience of the mind, the adaptability of the body, and the depth of the spirit. Through chaos, one learns patience. Through chaos, one learns clarity. And through chaos, one learns that the storm within is not the truth, but a temporary distortion of the truth. Inauthenticity is a subtle weight that presses upon the human spirit, though rarely recognized at first. It does not come suddenly or in obvious forms, but grows quietly like a shadow that follows us wherever we walk. At its core, inauthenticity is the act of betraying one's inner truth, of wearing a mask that does not belong to us, of saying words that are not born from our deepest convictions, and of shaping our lives around the expectations of others rather than the voice of our own soul. It is the quiet agreement to hide, to suppress, to pretend. Over time, this creates a distance between who we are and who we appear to be, and the further these two drift apart, the greater the strain on the heart, the body, and the mind. To live inauthentically means to become divided within. The inner voice speaks one way, but the outer expression moves another. This division is not without consequence. Energy, instead of flowing smoothly like a river, becomes blocked, redirected, and fragmented. The human being is designed to live in alignment when thought, word, and action are unified. Inauthenticity breaks this unity, leaving a person feeling restless, unfulfilled, and often confused without knowing why. This inner fracture is rarely healed by external success, recognition, or approval, because those are responses to the mask rather than to the truth beneath it. Why does inauthenticity arise? It often begins in small moments when one learns that truth can sometimes lead to rejection, that their vulnerability can sometimes bring pain, and that conformity often gains acceptance. Slowly, a person begins to craft an image, a presentation of the self that seems more secure, more likable, more fitting to the world's demands. But each compromise takes a piece away. Each small silence when honesty was needed, each smile when the heart felt sorrow, each yes spoken against an inner no. All of these build layers upon the soul, layers that obscure the original self. Over years, the authentic essence becomes buried under expectations, fears, and roles that were never truly chosen. The cost of inauthenticity is profound. It creates a life that looks complete on the surface, but feels hollow underneath. A person may have achievements, relationships, and possessions, yet still wake with a sense of emptiness because none of these things are connected to the genuine self. Living inauthentically also drains vitality because it requires constant effort to maintain a mask. Pretending is not passive, it is work. To hide what is real demands vigilance. To act in ways that are unnatural requires energy that could otherwise be used for growth, creativity, and connection. This constant expenditure exhausts the spirit, leaving less and less strength for what truly matters. Inauthenticity also damages relationships even when unnoticed. When two people interact, energy exchanges beyond words. If one is not presenting their true self, the connection becomes distorted. Trust cannot fully blossom because authenticity is the soil in which trust grows. Relationships built on masks become fragile, easily broken, or deeply unsatisfying. True intimacy requires vulnerability, and vulnerability cannot exist when one is hiding behind a facade. The path toward authenticity, therefore, begins with awareness. To notice where one is acting, speaking, or living in ways that do not reflect the true inner state. This noticing must be honest and free of judgment, for judgment only creates further hiding. Awareness brings light to the hidden places, and in this light, the weight of inauthenticity begins to dissolve. Authenticity does not demand perfection, nor does it mean expressing every passing emotion without consideration. Rather, it is the courage to align actions and choices with what feels genuinely true. Freedom arises when the mask is set down. The individual no longer needs to invest energy in maintaining an image. That energy becomes available for creativity, for growth, for presence. There is also a profound peace in authenticity because there is no longer a gap between the inner and outer world. The heart rests when it does not need to pretend. The mind rests when it does not need to calculate how to appear. The body rests when it is no longer tense from the effort of suppressing what is real. To live authentically is not always easy, because truth is not always welcomed by others. The world often prefers conformity, smooth surfaces, and predictable behaviors. But the reward of authenticity is not measured in external approval, it is measured in inner freedom. To walk authentically is to walk with integrity, where each step is grounded in one's real essence. This integrity cannot be bought, borrowed, or imitated. It is cultivated through courage, honesty, and continual self-reflection. Inauthenticity thrives where fear is stronger than trust. The fear of rejection, failure, or judgment persuades people to hide themselves. But as long as one remains hidden, the true self cannot fully develop. Just as a seed cannot grow in darkness without light, the soul cannot expand when constantly concealed. To overcome inauthenticity requires trust. Trust that life will support those who live in truth. Trust that relationships rooted in honesty will be stronger. And trust that even in solitude, authenticity is its own reward. When authenticity is embraced, the being becomes lighter. There is no longer a heavy burden of maintaining appearances, no longer the inner conflict of divided selves. Energy flows freely, creativity awakens, and relationships deepen. The world begins to reflect back not the mask, but the real essence of the individual. And in this reflection, one finds a sense of belonging, not because of pretending to fit, but because authenticity naturally finds where it belongs. In the journey of life, one of the most subtle traps is not failure, nor rejection, nor hardship. It is forgetting your own growth. This forgetting does not happen suddenly, nor does it arrive with a loud announcement. It arrives quietly, like dust settling on a mirror, layer by layer, until the reflection becomes unclear. You keep moving forward, yet you lose sight of the transformation that has already taken place within you. The danger lies not in what you have not achieved, but in not recognizing what you have already become. Growth is not always dramatic. Often, it is hidden in the smallest of shifts, in how you respond to anger, in the silence you choose over conflict, in the patience you extend when you once would have rushed, Yet, because these moments are so subtle, the mind overlooks them. We live in a world that glorifies visible milestones, new jobs, wealth, recognition, achievements. But the deeper growth, the kind that shapes character and spirit, is quiet. When forgotten, it leaves a person chasing validation without realizing they have already traveled far from who they once were. Forgetting your own growth also creates a false sense of stagnation. You might feel stuck, as if no progress is being made. But in truth, progress often occurs beneath the surface, like roots spreading silently beneath the soil. The seed does not see its own expansion, yet it continues to grow into a tree. Similarly, when you measure yourself only by external accomplishments, you lose sight of the invisible growth that is slowly preparing you for greater breakthroughs. There is also the danger of comparison. When you look outward at others, their visible success appears larger than your quiet transformation. You begin to diminish your own journey because it does not look like theirs. You forget the nights you endured, the battles you overcame within your own heart, the fears you dissolved. You forget the storms you passed through and how they refined your spirit. Forgetting your growth leads you to believe you are still at the beginning, when in truth, you have already walked a great distance. The act of remembering growth is not about pride, it is about clarity. When you recognize how far you have come, you carry a certain strength into the present moment. You stop underestimating yourself. You stop shrinking in the face of challenges. You stop repeating the same doubts that once held you back. To forget your growth is to live blind to your own power. To remember it is to walk with awareness of what has already been cultivated within you. Growth also teaches lessons that cannot be learned in books or speeches. It is lived wisdom. The experiences that once felt unbearable slowly carve resilience into your being. The people who left, the opportunities that slipped away, the mistakes that seemed heavy, all of them became teachers. But when you forget your own growth, you also forget the lessons that suffering delivered. You risk repeating cycles because you overlook the strength you already gained. Forgetting is not merely losing memory, it is erasing the value of your own experience. There is another dimension to this forgetting. It disconnects you from gratitude. When you do not acknowledge your growth, you miss the chance to feel grateful for the transformation that has already unfolded. Gratitude is a bridge between where you are and where you want to go. Without it, the mind becomes restless, always chasing, never satisfied. Remembering growth allows you to pause, to breathe, to appreciate the invisible victories that are already yours. Sometimes forgetting comes from distraction. In the business of daily life, the focus shifts outward, to responsibilities, to duties, to ambitions. The inner progress fades into the background. You carry yourself as though you are unchanged, while inside a quiet revolution has already taken place. The voice of the world grows louder than the voice within. This is why stillness is necessary, to sit, to reflect, to notice the distance traveled. Silence becomes a mirror that shows you what forgetting hides. At times, forgetting is rooted in self-criticism. The mind clings to flaws, to mistakes, to imperfections, and in doing so, it overshadows the steady growth that is unfolding. You see only the gap between who you are and who you want to be, ignoring the distance already crossed. This kind of forgetting is not innocent. It robs you of encouragement. It steals the fuel needed to continue. A traveler who forgets how far they have already come begins to believe the journey is impossible. Yet even in forgetting, the truth of growth remains. Just as a tree does not stop growing because you fail to notice its branches, your spirit continues to expand even when you are blind to it. The forgetting only creates disconnection. It does not erase what has been cultivated. Your resilience, your patience, your wisdom, your discipline, all remain, waiting for you to remember them. Forgetting your growth is like walking with treasures in your pocket, but believing you are poor. It is like carrying water while still feeling thirsty. It is a blindness that can be lifted by a single moment of reflection. The truth is, you are not who you were yesterday. You are not who you were a year ago. And while you may still desire transformation ahead, the forgetting of your own growth makes you lose sight of the transformation already behind you.